Are you trying to eat those chips as loud as you can?
Now I am.
You think you got a... All right, we're about to start. You think you got a handle on it?
Yeah, I'll just stop eating chips, I guess.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Zach.
And I'm Matt.
Ghost sounds. Chains rattling, chains rattling, chains rattling. I am the Dracula. It's Halloween.
And welcome to This Movie Was a Hot Dog, a podcast where me and a friend of mine, Matthew, watch a bad movie, critically, financially, or otherwise. Then we review it, break it down, and tell you what we think of it. And this week we watched 2012's, I think, The Colony, starring Bill Paxton, Lawrence Fishburne, and a skinny Canadian guy.
And a blonde girl.
And a blonde girl, but not really.
She's blonde.
No, that's not what... No. Yes, she is blonde. She's not really in the movie or matters at all.
No.
Okay. All right, I don't even... We're talking about her right now longer than the movie puts time into establishing her.
Okay, so we'll get into how the movie establishes her and how that was almost patently false for how her character turned out to be.
Or how they put no time at all into establishing any character in the movie ever. There's no characterization in this film other than just, like, punches to the face of, oh, he's the bad guy. Oh, he's the good guy. Like, that's it. Yeah,
they really rely entirely on makeup to determine who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. It's almost like the, what was the one thing you watched where it just ripped apart Star Wars Episode 1?
Oh, for anybody out there who listens to this, which is from our numbers, is nobody.
Yeah.
Red Letter Media Productions. You can go. They're on YouTube, Red Letter Media, or go to redlettermedia.com. They eviscerate every single of episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars to the point where even if you don't like the movie, if you watch their reviews, you'll come out of it like being angry at how much you hate the movie. You'll just be like, oh my god, I had no idea how bad it was. Oh!
It really takes it to the next level, and it's really a much better thing than ours. But that's okay.
But that's okay, because of...
But the point I'm trying to make is that in it, the biggest thing they talk about is the lack of characterization in Episode 1, where they ask random people on the street to describe some of the main characters from the movie without saying who they are, what they do, and just having to describe their personality. And for the most part, people can't. The best they come up with is for Qui-Gon Jinn, where they just go, stern?
But then when they're like, okay, somebody from the original movie, like Han Solo, and people like burst into these like elaborate descriptions.
Yeah, like a roguish pirate, like just doesn't care about authority, does what he wants, pretty selfish. And so there's a lot like, and so that's the case in this movie as well. Like if you take a look at Lawrence Fishburne, you might get a similar stern from about him, and then everyone else you'd get even less. But why don't we hop right into it?
Well, I was going to say before we get into it, I have a little thing for you. So I remember last week you said, well, you know, when we do these foreign films, and we've been on this weird string of foreign films, honestly, strictly by coincidence. And when I was watching this movie, I was looking it up, and it turns out this movie's a foreign film.
What?
This is a Canadian movie.
That doesn't count.
That counts. Because
okay,
you know how
when someone says, if you ask someone if they've traveled abroad and they go like, yeah, I've been to Toronto plenty of times, and you go, wow, do you have any souvenirs from your exotic experience? Do you have any Canadian currency? Yeah, but not from my trip to Canada, just from the one time a clerk gave me back a Canadian quarter and I couldn't use it in the Coke machine and I was pretty upset. So it really doesn't count. It doesn't.
The only reason I bring it up, and it's funny you mentioned currency, was because I looked it up, and two things I like to look up are how is this movie received and how much did it cost and or make? And when I looked it up,
the cost was in Canadian dollars.
Yeah, the cost was in Canadian.
And so that was your first clue of like, huh.
Well, I looked it up and it went, this movie cost 16 million Canadian bucks.
Oh my God.
16 million Canadian loonies. And the thing is, I don't know if you knew this, in Canada, most, if not all, major productions are partially funded through government funding.
Oh. Kind of like ones in North Carolina.
But part of the cast, at least, like, if not the lead, the second lead has to be Canadian.
That seems like a pretty important stipulation.
Right. So the weird scrawny guy who is the lead for really what appears to be no reason other than he is Canadian and they needed that money.
Turns out that was the reason.
Turns out that's the reason. This guy, who is the main character for no emotional connection whatsoever, is in it so they could have a government tax cash grab.
That really makes a lot of sense because, again, like...
Doesn't that explain so much of this movie now?
Yeah, you could put his personality on a wall and walk right into it and not know what happened.
But he was born in Toronto, and he just stood in front of a camera, and the Canadian government gave them, I don't know, however Canadian bucks, many of that is millions or whatever.
That's a sentence.
I had all the words in there to make a sentence. Listeners, you go back and form your own sentence. You can email us at thismovie'sahotdog@gmail.com.
Good plug. Anyway, let's get into that movie that we're going to talk about. This is one of those movies that tried to raise a bit of drama from the get-go by starting with two people running down a long hallway and banging on a door.
And then that stops.
And then, of course, the door doesn't open and the camera catches them, and presumably the camera guy is holding a stick and beats them to death. I don't know. And then after that...
Because in Canada, all the deaths on film have to be real.
Yeah, you know.
They have to actually kill those people. Lawrence Fishburne really blew up. He
but if you die in Canada, you don't die in real life, so it's okay.
That's right. If you die in Canada, you just rematerialize back where you were born in America.
So that's all we get from there. We later learn that that's another colony. But now, once the movie actually starts, for a contiguous scene, we go to a guy who's just like grinding stuff on a satellite dish. So I assume he's fixing the TVs for the base, and they can get, you know, fancy TiVo. I don't really care.
Well, I was upset at first because I immediately assumed that because this is like post-apocalyptic, when he was working on a satellite dish, I was like, wait a minute. They mentioned it later that, we reconnected to a satellite, blah, blah, blah. Because at first I was screaming at my TV going like, you don't know how satellites work. I had to scratch that note off my notes because I had a whole tirade about how communications and satellites, but then they immediately went, we reconnected to an old satellite. And I was like, oh, well, you got away with this one, the colony.
And how gracious of you to admit defeat.
I will admit I'm wrong when I am wrong.
Good. But back to someone who won't. We have the execution squad lead a sick person out of the colony and tell them, you know, you got sick. We gave you a few days to recover because, you know, it takes you 3 days to get over the flu. Everyone knows that. Otherwise, you're going to have it forever. And...
The execution squad, by the way, is led by Bill Paxton. Bill Paxton leads this old guy into the cold, holding a rifle at him. He's like, you're sick. And he's like, yeah, I've got a cough. And he's like, I don't care. I'm going to shoot you. And he's like, you don't have to shoot me. Like, I'll just leave. And he's like, and he just shoots him in the face.
I mean, you know, it's way more satisfying to do that anyway. So I'm on his side.
Just shoots this old man in the face. And that's where that is the first instance of bad characterization happens, where Bill Paxton, who is the badish guy in this movie, he is the bad guy because he is supposed to be the bad guy, We see him shoot an old man 45 seconds into this movie, and then from then on, we're just supposed to accept him as this villain. There is no other characterization into it that goes into him. It's just right off the bat, you just see him blindly murder a man, and you just go, okay, well, I don't like that guy now because I don't kill people, so I don't like people who do.
Exactly. It's a really flat characterization, and it only goes down from there.
Yeah, it gets way worse for him.
So after this scene where the guy repairing the radar dish protests and whatever, he goes in and he becomes our narrator, talking about how sickness has plagued the colony.
You haven't explained the world we're in.
Sure, let's start there.
Well, this is in the future, vaguely, after global warming got out of hand. So the governments of the world decided we are going to build large weather controlling machines to cool the Earth because it is rapidly warming. And we go so far the other way that we accidentally create a global encompassing ice age that ends civilization as we know it. And I got the impression that this has happened for 20 years-ish.
I feel like it's even longer. If you go off some of the decay of the structures, like the bridge that they have to cross later on, it really seems like it's like 50 or 100.
But the Canadian lead isn't that old, and he talks about how when he was a kid, he remembers before this happened because
exactly
it's
all pretty inconsistent in my opinion.
Right, and I'm gonna say he's 28, so that's why I went 20 years-ish, sort of.
I think that's what they want you to think, but then apparently society fell apart pretty damn quick.
Apparently society fell apart in a weekend because the snow is enough for everybody to lose their shit and just destroy the world.
Especially in Canada.
Well, that was the other thing. Where is this movie set? I looked it up.
So the people, I think, are supposed to be inside the seed vault.
No, I mean, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Is this movie set?
Like I said, they're in the infamous seed vault.
But that's in Greenland.
Yeah.
They're not in Greenland, Matt.
But they're in the seed vault.
They cross a giant megastructure bridge for a huge city. They're not in Greenland.
I felt the same way. I don't know. So it looked like the seed vault, but then, as you said, they crossed through the city, so it is pretty hard to place them.
If there was a global catastrophe and a world-encompassing ice age, Greenland is the first to go, where everybody just straight up freezes to death.
Or maybe, because it's already always cold, they're prepared for it. Do you think the equatorial Mexico is going to be ready for the ice age?
Well, we'll get into cold later on, but this movie would have, it should be negative 45 out every day.
Yeah, that's pretty much the world they paint. The guy repairing the radar dish kind of welcomes us into the colony.
As the Canadian lead. For whom so much government money was spent. And so he explains to us that at the colony's founding, there was about 400 people. And any given infection can take out 20 at a time. And so, hence the very tense atmosphere over any kind of cough and sneeze and sickness. Well, they refer to it because these people are afraid of at one point it's the super flu, at another point it's the regular flu, and in the beginning he mentions the common cold. But they mention all three, so which one is it? Because, yes, the apocalypse happened, and it's the Ice Age, and everybody's freezing to death, but our immune systems aren't destroyed. We could still fight off the common cold, and he calls it that.
So the counterpoint to that would be, this is a society where people are living underground, they don't get sunlight, they're pretty malnourished, and it's constantly cold. So it would be pretty safe to assume they're immunocompromised, and they're living in close quarters, so everything, spreads really fast. So I think it's more believable than you might think.
Okay, I had an issue with it, because they keep bringing it up, but all right. Oh, okay, you've convinced me.
All right. I'm so glad I did, because this movie clearly didn't, and maybe that's part of the problem with it.
But can you blame me that it didn't?
Exactly. They don't say, like, we're starving and we're weak and, like, blah, blah, blah. They kind of rely on you to have more background knowledge. And you really shouldn't assume that about your audience.
Right.
Because their audience is you, and you're an idiot.
Because I'm the audience, and I'm an idiot.
But yeah, so once we cover the sickness stuff, he kind of, as we're being welcomed into the colony by our Canadian protagonist, we see, like, essentially hydroponic farms where they're growing carrots. We see what I'm going to call the rodent ranch, where they've got a bunch of, like, rabbits and mice.
That's the best way to put it.
And that's what it is. It's their only source of protein, and they're raising these rabbits like cattle.
Because there's even a farmer.
Yep.
No, that's dead on.
And so, like, they're making a go of it and making, sustainable food sources underground. But obviously, one of the things they talk about is, like, it's working, but it's not quite working. Like, everything down here needs sun. Everything down here needs meat. Even the meat kind of needs meat. And so...
Oh my God, I love that. I feel like that's how, like, that should be the new beef slogan. You remember, it's like beef, that's what's for dinner, should be beef, because even meat needs meat.
I'd eat it, if that's the marketing campaign. Then again, I don't need much convincing.
Even meat needs meat. I love it.
And so, long story short, like, these people need food, they need better living conditions. Turns out an underground metal structure in a post-apocalyptic cold world isn't a great place to live.
They do a decent job of setting up, like, where these people are. Like, it's cramped, it's muggy, it's poorly lit. There's always pipes dripping. There's no room where
I feel like the colony structure itself has more characterization than the people.
It does. It really does. You're right. Because there isn't a room that doesn't have, like, a puddle in the corner or a pipe that isn't dripping. And they do a good job of setting up that, like, this place, not these people, but this place is just on the verge of collapse and is just surviving enough to keep going.
Yeah, it really has a sense of the brink. And so... while our protagonist is kind of rolling through, he bumps into Lawrence Fishburne, or Morpheus, who stays pretty close to Morpheus in this movie, I gotta be honest.
I was gonna say, I was waiting to have this talk with you. We're just calling him Morpheus, right? Like, that's just from now on?
Goodness knows that's what I did in all of my notes.
Okay, so the main Canadian, we'll just call him Canadian Boy. Canadian Boy goes to talk to Morpheus.
Yeah, so he goes to talk to Morpheus, and let's see here, where am I in my notes here? So they kind of have a conversation about crazy, execution guy on the surface, but then they sort of stumble into the radio room where we hear that there's an SOS from Colony 5, and we learn the one we're in is Colony 7. And so... at this point, it was kind of hard to tell, like, if it was just different parts of the same structure. But later on, we learned that it's like a 2-day hike out to Colony 5. And so a meeting is called to determine, like, what are we going to do? And so, I don't know, what are your feelings so far about just, like, Morpheus and Canadian guy and just the whole dynamic of the colony?
Well, so far I was relatively into it. When we set it up, we set up our three main characters. Bill Paxton is the bad guy, just because we explained why he shoots an old man. Mm-hmm. The kid is our lead because we needed the money, and other than that, he's no real reason that I can discern that he's the lead. He just is. He's not a jerk. He doesn't do anything. You don't see him like, oh no, there's an emergency, and he runs over and he has wrenches and shit and he fixes something. There's nothing like that where it's like, this guy is important, reliable, and smart. It honestly feels like there's probably 3 other guys in this bunker that can do what he does. But
he even says that.
Right, but again, we need the loonies, so you're the main character. Lawrence Fishburne is just the guy in charge, which is fine, because that character doesn't really need anything else. He says he was a captain in the army later on, and now he's the leader of this colony, which is fine, frankly. And you know what? I bought it. He was serviceable in this movie. In my opinion, Morpheus is the best actor in this film.
He is. I mean, certainly his very stock background notwithstanding, he has something to him. But in the end, he's still pretty bland.
But all in all, okay, you need somebody to be in charge. He is a presence. He speaks with authority. He's a big black guy, which is who I'll listen to. And if a big black guy walked into my house right now and just started telling me what to do, I'd be like, oh, something must be happening.
My reaction might be different, but...
well, I guess who's more racist of the two then? But he does a decent job. When he's fighting, he portrays, I feel like he's actually trying to kill the guy he's fighting.
No, I definitely agree. One of the things we always talk about in these is the action sequences, and this is another movie where they really do well in the action sequences. Morpheus's primary weapon ends up being an ice pick, and his kill count by the end of the movie is probably in the dozens.
Right, and it's not he is just an old man who kind of lumbers, because he's up there. He's almost in his 50s. When he's fighting a dude, I'm like, this is an old man who has a lot of upper body strength and is just, trying to crush a man's skull and doing it.
He comes off as pretty lethal. But again, when we come back to the characterization, he has played a better characterized character before. When he played Morpheus, there was a lot of moments where he just had blind hope, and he always came off as hopeful and even a little bit naive. Whereas in this, he's just stern, and so
but his character is the one character I'll go I'm gonna let that go because he doesn't need to be anything other than stern because he's in charge. Yeah. And I don't know about you, because I knew nothing about this movie going into it. I sort of figured he wasn't gonna make it to the end.
I thought he was going to do more than he did, but that's because I'm bad at guessing the future in movies.
Well, okay. So that's where we are at this point. Though the world is set very well, except for how people react to cold. We'll get into that way later.
But yeah. So anyway, we go back to... They're deciding to set up a rescue mission to Colony 5, or possibly not even a rescue mission, mostly just a feel what's out mission, because
he straight up says Morpheus does, how many leftover radio parts do we have? Because their radio's probably just broken. Yeah. Give us what you can spare. We'll take it over, fix the radio, and we'll come back.
And so they kind of set out, but before they do, someone sneezes and coughs in the meeting room. And they have to go lock them up in quarantine, to deal with later.
Well, this person sneezes, and they all act as though somebody just shot a gun into the ceiling.
And when later they pretty much do shoot a gun into the ceiling, people react.
It's just if someone sneezes, everyone loses their shit. Even though they live in a bunker, there is dust and mold and all kinds of shit all over the place. Somebody sneezing should happen every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But one lady sneezes and people run out of the room screaming.
Yeah, it's another example of how oversimplified this movie gets at times.
Next morning they leave. Yeah. Next morning they all decide, hey, okay. The next morning they go, okay, we're leaving for the colony. So, Canadian lead, Morpheus, and a third person who is clearly supposed to die.
Right, exactly. Just the second they put him on the mission, it's oh, you're just above an extra in importance, and you're going off. You're not long
dead.
For this world.
You're dead. So they start traversing the tundra that is the Earth now, and as they're marching across, they come to a bridge, and this is where I thought that guy was supposed to die. Because
you just thought he was just going to fall off.
I did. I thought he was just going to fall because they build up the scene because they're crossing this bridge and there's a gap and they have to jump from the one part to the other closest part. There's no other way to get there. And they all three jump, and there's a build-up to where I thought surely the kid is going to die. Yeah. This third useless person who has no name will die, and he didn't. And I was like, well, then... And then later on, when they have to cross the bridge again, it's like, well, why even have that gap there? Like, there's no drama to it.
I mean, it eventually plays a role, but yeah.
Not really, though.
Kind of. But yeah, so it... Anyway, they go through and we kind of get our first wide shots of the post-apocalyptic world where you see buildings just buried in snow. The bridge that we see, like the bridge bed is just rotted to hell. There's holes everywhere that you can just fall through. The steel structure doesn't look very sound.
And there's a bit of a monologue. It's very short where he sort of explains the weather machines, like they walk up to a weather machine that looks like it's about a million miles into the sky. It also just
the CG of the movie is not great.
Listen, they had to pay Lawrence Fishburne and Bill Paxton. That's $10 million. You got $6 million Canadian dollars to play with. You got to pay all those cannibal extras. Like, where do you spend this money?
There's going to be cannibal extras. We haven't even gotten to that yet.
No, we haven't, but that's where the money goes. And because they got to spend all that money on squibs and cutting people's heads off effects.
But yeah. So we see this weather control device. They kind of mention it a little more, but they do most of that work in the beginning. And we're just kind of rolling on to Colony 5, which, again, turns out to just be like a 2-day hike.
And halfway there, they spend the night in this downed helicopter, which is my first issue I have with the weather in this movie.
Yeah.
So there's this downed helicopter, and the kid is like, not the Canadian lead, but the dead meat is, we'll just call him Dead Meat.
Okay.
Goes, oh, what is this? And he's like, oh, this used to save people and used to fly in the sky like a bird. And... because they make a point that he's so young that he was born in the bunker.
Yeah.
And they make a point to say how this is a designated checkpoint between the two colonies for, 20 years? Like, this thing should be under 30 feet of snow, or at the very least, a frozen block of ice, but they walk up to it and open the door, and the door just opens. This thing shouldn't even be there. This is crazy. First of all, outside, it is snowing 24 hours a day. It never, ever stops snowing. Ever.
Yeah.
This thing should not be there.
No, it's really dumb. And I guess I never even noticed about that just because I thought the whole scene was so boring. I mostly ignored it.
This helicopter should, when they wake up in the morning, they should open the door and go, oh, we're under 30 feet of snow, because it snows all the time and the wind is like 30 miles an hour all the time. They should at least be in a snowdrift. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, this should not be there.
Speaking of snowdrifts, I don't know if you noticed this, but this was probably one of the biggest things that bothered me.
Are you talking about the footprints?
No. Well, kind of.
Well, we'll get to the footprints when they come back.
So mostly I'm going to talk about, though, like, if you look at all their backpacks, they all have, like, snowshoes and, like, lots of winter walking gear and stuff like that. And it stays on their backpacks.
Which you don't... Well, that's okay. Do you want to get into the cold right now? Because I got some issues with the cold.
Sure, let's get into the cold now before we get to the fun parts.
Sure. In this world where there is a 20-year global encompassing ice age, sometimes you need a parka, snowshoes, gloves, goggles, several layers. But sometimes all you need is a light jacket or like a shawl, and you're fine.
Yeah, I definitely have a note there, especially inside the colony, where like the guy will hang out in like a wife beater, but then other people will be sitting around in their parkas.
Well, and not only that, spoilers, there are cannibals in this movie. The cannibals don't even wear that. They wear like a tattered robe, and their heads are uncovered, and they're running through the snow, and I'm like, if this world really existed, it would be so cold out that going outside should be an event.
Yeah. And
like there should be a thing where somebody goes, I'm going outside, and he has to go into an airlock and then put on, honestly, nothing less than a spacesuit.
I guess the closest they come to saying that is in Colony 7, they talk about surface time.
But when they talk about that, they talk about surface time, but then Morpheus is outside for like a day.
Yeah.
And all you just, you got a nice jacket on, you zip it up, you make sure you do that button right around your neck. You don't want to get your neck cold, and then you're fine. But sometimes, that doesn't matter, and I understand it. It's not the Ice Age. It's not freezing outside. These actors don't even try to act cold. Act cold! At points, Lawrence Fishburne takes off his gloves. In a better movie, him taking off his gloves should be like, what are you, crazy? And they should have to have him, his hands are freezing and he has to hurry up and do what he has to do with his fingers because his gloves are too thick. But am I wrong, though?
No, you're right. It's a big thing where, they act like they're in a studio surrounded by CG snow.
Well, because they are.
Another thing, though, I feel like it could have been more of a plot device. The fact that, they're in a big steel building. It's cold outside. Fuel and heating sources and things like that should drive a lot of their day-to-day actions. And so I don't feel like they do.
They never even mention, oh my God, we're running out of gasoline.
Exactly. Like Mad Max, it was all about the gasoline, and they didn't even need it to survive. They just needed to get around. They
didn't need it at all. They just kind of wanted it.
Yeah, they just kind of wanted it because cars are just awesome.
Because cars and guns are cool. In this movie, they're like, gasoline is the thing that's keeping us from dying. And they're like, what? And he's like, gasoline. He's like, what?
What?
And that was it.
You mean the flu?
Right. Not even the flu. They call it the illness.
The itis.
You mean the itis? And he's like, no, the gas. He's like, I don't know what you're saying, though.
I don't know what you're saying. Our lights are kept on by magic. So
our lights are kept on by rabbit corpses because apparently we
have a lot of those. They do.
We have a lot of rabbit corpses, so we're just throwing them into the furnace. Because they burn hotter than coal.
So now that we've adequately discussed the cold, so we find ourselves at Colony 5, which is just a massive facility. Again, looks totally run down like 7. This place is huge. It looks like it would need a maintenance staff of 50 people to keep it running.
It looks like they could fit 1,000 people in there comfortably, but I guess there was only 50 people in there.
Exactly. So we eventually learned that the starting population of 5 was roughly 50 people. So the 3 people who just don't look like they're going to live forever are creeping down the hallway, brandishing their guns, and they find their way into a locked room at the end of the hallway. The room has huge scratches on the outside, and it looks like a place people have been trying to get into for some time.
Easily.
And so Canadian guy picks the lock, gets in. They find a guy just under layers of blankets and stuff. They kind of shake that loose, and he just starts freaking the fuck out and raising and swinging a crowbar everywhere. And they would have been completely in their right to shoot him in the face. And they don't, for some reason, honestly.
They just don't.
Yeah.
Well, I also got because they start calling him by his name, so I sort of got the feeling that they knew him because they're familiar with this other colony. They know where the checkpoint is. They know where it is. They know the people inside. So I gave them this. They knew this dude.
Yeah, fair enough. But in any case, So here's one of my other things, though. In a world where they fear the spread of sickness, they give this guy some water and he gets his mouth all over the thing. I live in a not post-apocalyptic world with a healthy immune system and access to medicine, and I don't want someone slobbering all over my water bottle.
But one thing I didn't like was, he takes the water and he's chugging it, and one of them goes hey, you take it easy on the water, man. You know what? you have plenty of in a world of
in a
ice
world of snow.
In a world of snow, you know what you have more than enough of? A water supply.
I don't think they were worried about the water supply. I think they were worried about him just like choking himself.
But he was just chugging the water. He's like, hey, that's enough. And they like sort of yank it out of his mouth. And it's like, there is water. You don't have food. You don't have gas. You don't have electricity. You got water. You got that. Give this guy all the water he wants.
All right. But so this is where we get a bit of good news, bad news out of Colony 5. The good news is Colony 5, through getting their giant space antenna working, was able to receive a transmission that someone had hijacked one of the weather changers to summarize a surrounding area. They got the thawed amount, they have tillable soil, they have sunlight, and things are looking good to possibly turn this around. But they don't have any seeds, because, lo and behold, our protagonist is from the seed vault, and if we didn't have a MacGuffin before, we have one now.
But only kind of.
But the bad news that we get is the people that Colony 5 sent out to search for this location ended up dying, and the people who killed them followed their trail back to Colony 5 and murdered pretty much everyone.
Right, so that's sort of when we find out that our bad thing is cannibals. These people who, they don't have any technology, they don't have anything, they just go from colony to colony in basketball shorts and tattered robes, even though it's the Ice Age, and slaughter everybody and then eat them. But they're not like crazy people, they're monster.
Exactly. It's more
they're monster people.
Exactly, because you said they don't have technology. It goes deeper than that. They don't have verbal communication. They just yell.
Well, I want to go back for just a minute and ask you in your professional opinion, because you're better at this than I am.
Totally professional.
Totally. So we're 20 years into the apocalypse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can't dig into the ground. We can't make food. Even the food that is food for the food is dying. Computer technology.
Sure.
Would we be able to maintain a laptop, just a standard Asus, capable of connecting to a government satellite to survey the Earth? Can we do that? Because everybody is communicating through these old laptops, and I have a laptop. 4 years, it's done. 6 years, you're pushing it.
You could find enough spare parts. I don't think that's the biggest issue.
Dude, well, I don't... Okay. Well, all right, you convinced me again. Man, you're on a roll.
Right? Yeah, I mean, in the end, circuit boards don't really go bad on their own unless something goes bad. Hard drive is the most likely thing to fail, but those are pretty common, and they're really easy to swap out.
Are you telling me that in a movie like this, just let that one go?
Yeah, because there's much bigger fish to fry.
Fair enough. Moving on.
There really is. Because, Zach, if you're wondering how they eat and breathe, another scientific facts, you should realize that it's just a show, and you should really just relax.
Sit back and just relax?
See, you know it. Anyway, so once we learned that people were killing people, dun dun dun, we hear some thunking in the background, and the crazy guy who locked himself in a room before, lo and behold, goes and locks our heroes out again, because he's that guy. He's the guy who just locks himself in the room.
Well, they don't believe him. He's like, oh my God, who is out there? Are they still out there? And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. We just heard you knocking, so we came and saved you. And he's like, I wasn't knocking. And that's like, right. And you're supposed to be like, what? And honestly, kind of worked for me, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
And they all walk outside, and he shuts the door behind them. I'd probably do the same thing.
I don't know. I just think it's silly because, in the end, he's the guy who's going to survive right up until he dies of starvation from, locking everyone who could have helped him out of there.
I guess you say it like that.
Yeah.
You convinced me again. 3 in a row.
Woo!
You're almost home. One more base.
But anyway, so the group follows the thunking and also some occasional screaming, and they come on upon a room that is just full of bodies. And you see 3 guys, like one of whom just has a cleaver and is chopping up body parts, one of whom is snacking on an arm, and one of whom is just picking his teeth because, that's his biggest concern.
Well, I mean, dental hygiene, because there's no dentists, Matt. You don't want to...
Certainly not amongst this group, they're not. I looked at this, I thought everybody in this room was dead.
So did I, and this is where my thing where they're less human and more animal goes in, because they survey this room, there's a big panning shot, and it's all these, like, legs and arms sticking out of this pile, and I assumed that was a pile of dead people.
Yeah.
Turns out it's a pile of cannibals sleeping with each other as if they're like rats.
Yeah, just sleeping one on top of the other like they were all thrown there.
Trying to get warm.
Hey, there you go. Trying to get warm because they're all wearing basketball shorts.
Well, because they are. They're not wearing anything.
But anyway, so Mr. Gonna Die, or Dead Meat we called him, he gags and whatever, and everybody turns, and we see the rising of the horde. Canadian guy in true representation of the maple leaf unloads some rounds and takes out some people.
And he's like, "Oh, Canada!" Go.
While he chugs maple syrup.
While he chugs maple syrup, and everybody in Canada goes, "Yeah, see, we do things."
See, take that, Lawrence Fishburne. You haven't done shit.
Well, it proves that Dead Meat is Dead Meat, because Lawrence Fishburne is like, "We need to leave." Dead Meat just runs into a dark tunnel that's with a sign above it that says, "You will die here." And the Canadian lead is fighting fiercely with a maple leaf in his mouth and shooting people. And just like he has a Mountie hat on. He doesn't, but he might as well. And it really sets up that, like, yes, Lawrence Fishburne is smart. This guy is the lead. And Dead Meat he's got 45 seconds of life left. He's Dead Meat. He's dead.
So this is one of our first awesome action scenes of Lawrence Fishburne using an ice pick to just tear out people's throats. Almost
like he's done it before.
Like, yeah, this is another day in the office, in the post-apocalyptic office of Lawrence Fishburne.
Right, like, the kid runs away because he's like, "I've never seen anything like this. I'm going to go and be Dead Meat." And the other guy's like, "I'm the lead. I can't die." And Lawrence Fishburne is like, "I did this in The Matrix once. This is nothing."
I'm an American actor. I've fought my way out of shit before.
I fought an agent. This is fine.
Exactly. And so, lo and behold, Dead Meat dies. He, like, not even exciting or anything. He rounds a corner and his stomach is just shanked like 60 times.
Well, I was going to say, I thought that this wasn't exciting, but, like, 2 guys find him around a corner, and they don't creep or anything. They run up to him and stab him so many times that, like, he is so dead. He is very dead.
Yeah, they basically manually blended his stomach.
Ew.
It happened.
You're right, but that's gross.
But this is one of the moments where, like, if you watch zombie movies, and I know you have, like, what keeps the zombies from eating each other? And this is a movie full of cannibals what keeps the cannibals from eating each other? How do you join the cannibals? Why? These cannibals are dropping like flies against gunfire. If they encountered like 3 or 4 groups of people with guns, this entire gang should be extinguished unless they were recruiting aggressively.
If they encountered 3 people with revolvers, that's half their numbers.
Exactly.
They should be picking up women, taking children, like brainwashing the children. They are not interested in that whatsoever. They are just so hungry. Even though, after killing this entire colony, it seems like they have enough meat to last them, like, 2 weeks.
You know, at least maybe the quarter.
They go off the fiscal quarter?
Well, it's more of a meat quarter, but you get it.
Well, because they get up and they are not like, who's that? Over there. Oh, no, an intruder. Somebody gets up and they go like, and
then just tear off.
Right. Like I want to see the meeting in the bunker of the colony. They took over. They're like, okay, well, we have 300 pounds of human meat, and that can last us. Like, well, sir, actually, this person has diabetes. And he's like, okay, good point. We'll
give him an extra 1.5 ration.
We'll calculate that out. Okay, everybody will meet here tomorrow. No, they're just inhuman monsters who were just...
And, like, a caged lion won't eat anything that's thrown in there. If it's eaten, it's probably 2 days before it gives a fuck.
And these people have clearly eaten.
They're eating now. They were eating when we first saw them. And so anyway, those inconsistencies aside, the gang decides to cheese it, and so they just book it down this hallway, and Lawrence Fishburne grabbed 3 chunks of dynamite when they were in the locked room with the crazy guy. He uses one of them now to kind of buy them some time and take out a few guys.
Well, did this bother you? So they're all trying to get out. They're all going to climb out of this tower they climbed in on. Yeah. And Lawrence Fishburne kicks this ladder off of this ledge that he climbed up to. And they all stop. Like, 35 cannibals stop and stare at him. And it's like, they're not, like, ladder is a very, like, dogs can use ladders. Like, this is not a hard concept. Like, they're all just like, ooh, you got away. We're going to have to run out the back exit. The ladder's on the ground. Why aren't they picking it up? Zach,
Lawrence Fishburne went and destroyed an advanced ascension technology that they will never be able to replace.
It's a ladder. It's
advanced ascension technology.
He kicks it off the ground, and when he does, it falls down, and they all look at him, and he goes like, yeah, stopped you forever.
They're fixed forever.
That's right. They're fixed forever. And they're all like, ooh, you're right. We'll never get you. Better. Like, there's not a scene where 3 people go like, hey, help me. Like, no, you pick that side of the ladder up. Okay, you go over there and you pick the front up. And it's like, and he's like, oh, no, they're coming. They just go like, oh, well, we can't get up there. That's done now.
And then, so not only that, but the last time we see them, they're at the base of the structure. Then Lawrence Fishburne uses another chunk of dynamite, and the whole thing just implodes on itself.
Like thousands of tons of concrete.
Now, to be fair, as we've said, most of these structures look pretty decrepit and neglected and ready to fall into their own weight. But at a certain point, like, reinforced concrete's pretty durable. In fact, it gets harder with age. So.
But does it get harder in the post-apocalyptic ice age?
Not if we're in a movie, it doesn't.
Okay, good. Whew, I forgot we were in a movie for a second.
Thank goodness we are, and it has its very own set of physics. So our remaining 2 members of Colony 7 are booking it out of there, and just like, again, they're in 2-foot snowdrifts, not making any use of the bright orange snowshoes that are on their backpacks. And so they make it back to the helicopter waypoint that they were at before to spend the night, because Lawrence Fishburne says, like, it's getting too cold. Obviously, nighttime in a post-apocalyptic frozen wasteland, probably too cold to travel in. And so the next morning, we see the pack of feral people hot on their trail. And this is where we get to your point that you probably wanted to make about the footsteps in the snow.
Because they get out of the helicopter and they turn around, and like 30 feet behind them are all of the cannibals. And they go, oh no, they followed our footprints, even though their footprints should have been covered in snow or blown away within minutes. Minutes!
Yeah, because it's like a squall outside anytime you open a door. But
it's like 6 hours later.
Yep.
And they're like, oh no, they followed our footprints. And there's a pan down and they see all their footprints. And I'm like, well, that's not how snow works. This movie was made in Canada, right? Anybody Anybody on the set should have gone, well, that's
not true.
that's not true, but okay. What
you know what? Maybe Lawrence Fishburne directed that shot, and he's from Hollywood land.
That, you know what? That is the best explanation I have.
Probably not true, but let's roll with it.
Let's go with it.
Anyway, so they stayed the night in the hotel, and then they find their way back to the
the helicopter.
The helicopter hotel.
Oh, so I'm sorry, I forgot it had a name.
And so they find their way back to the broken down bridge that they crossed earlier with, let's face it, not much drama. However, now it's fallen apart even further in the 24 hours somehow, but lasted 20 years before anyway. So they have to take a running jump across the gap in the bridge bed. They make it, and they leave behind some dynamite to blow the bridge apart and hopefully, again, fix the problem forever. This is Lawrence Fishburne's last chunk of dynamite, so, obviously needs to work. As he's lighting it, the people are like 60 yards down the bridge. So he has like barely enough time for the fuse to go off before they're there.
And dynamite fuses are quick.
Yeah. And so this should all happen like in a matter of seconds. But of course, because it's a movie, the people on the bridge keep hitting the rewind button and going back 30 yards every time we pan back to them. And so the dynamite fuse goes out because of the wind. And so...
because of the Ice Age.
But let's face it, mostly because the writers said it was supposed to. And so Lawrence Fishburne has to knock out Canadian guy to go kill himself with dynamite because, movie wasn't dramatic enough and they could only pay Lawrence Fishburne for so many days of work.
Right. Lawrence Fishburne's like, I'm going to go do it. He's like, no, don't go do it. And Lawrence Fishburne just punches him in the mouth.
Nope, headbutts him.
Headbutts him, runs over to go do it, takes his gloves off. Again, that should be a thing. Doesn't, tries to light it, does, and just fights these cannibals who are trying to jump over the ledge one by one, and he's doing a really good job to the point where I'm like, just run away.
Just drop the dynamite, kill anybody who makes it past, and just be golden. But he doesn't. He holds on to it. Yeah.
We said it at the same time. He holds on to it and explodes and dies. And so the Canadian lead, trudges back through the tundra back to where Bill Paxton is about to shoot another person because he's the bad guy.
So Bill Paxton has the two people who sneezed and coughed earlier in the meeting before Morpheus left them. And obviously his belief in the quarantine system is so high that he has them outside at gunpoint. The husband is begging Bill Paxton to test her for sickness, and he goes, no, we're just going to assume that you're sick because, fuck science in a world that has been only kept alive by it. And he just shoots her in the head. And before he can turn the gun on the husband, the blonde chick who Morpheus left in charge and was running the seed bank. Oh my God, I missed the one part about her that I wanted to bring up. So this chick, when we first see her, the Canadian guy goes into her area and is sneaking up on her, and then all of a sudden she just spins around and has her gun in his throat, attempting to characterize her as someone who is never caught off guard, always has her gun on her, and is probably a little on edge. So Lawrence Fishburne leaves her in charge. Flash forward to what's-his-face killing two people. She pops out of the colony to stop him from killing the other guy. And all of a sudden, this is also when Sam, the Canadian guy, arrives. And in this distraction, the other person who was going to get shot kind of just Zoidbergs away.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
And so she runs out to Canadian guy because, of course, they're lovers. And then just before you even know it, Bill Paxton just gun butts her to the face and knocks her out. The only thing we've seen about her before this was that she is always aware and always carries a gun. and that is just out the window the first second it might have mattered.
Well, because the movie's almost over. Because at this point, this is an hour-and-a-half movie. There are 15 minutes left.
Yeah, and 15 minutes of action.
Well, yeah, because you have to kill everybody.
So, Canadian guy wakes up in the medical wing of the colony. He tries to warn people about the crazy people coming, but of course no one gives a fuck. They basically might as well have shouted, "I don't care," as they handcuffed him to his hospital bed, and then went off to go be semi-evil with guns. Turns out he wasn't lying, and the bad guys come.
Well, when he comes back, Bill Paxton immediately stages a coup and goes, "Is Lawrence Fishburne dead?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, he's dead." He goes, "Well, I'm in charge now. Everybody gets half food, half rations for everyone." And I went, you know what, Bill Paxton? Your whole thing is, I'm protecting us from the flu. Everyone needs to be protected from the flu. And his first real thing is no one gets all their food. You know what doesn't help fight off a virus?
Malnourishment.
but I'm like, this is so counterproductive to what you were trying to do.
And so just further establishing him as, like, chaotic evil. So we get to the crazy people coming, the actual crazy people. And Bill Paxton goes, "Oh, God, I was wrong. Here's guns, and we're all cool now, right?"
But he doesn't really do that, though.
I know, but, like, their actions kind of imply that conversation, which is just so dumb. He's just like, everybody who can hold a gun, go get a gun, and we're going to go try and stop them. And then, like, the unspoken thing is just, we're cool, though. Like, right? And so they go and try and stop them. But apparently, there isn't just one way into this facility that all these people have been living in for 20 years. There's tons of ways that they either didn't know about or just didn't care about. But either way, the crazy people find their way in and just start murdering the defenders from all sides.
Like, they pour out of these vents. They pour out of these air ducts. And I mean, like, an air duct is kicked open and 5 dudes just slide out of it and start slaughtering these people, like cutting their throats and ripping their hearts out. They want them dead.
Yeah, and again, they all have, like, knives and crowbars and melee weapons. And so throughout the next few minutes, just the people defending the colony are constantly losing ground. Because as we learned when colonists came to America, you cannot possibly withstand melee weapons with guns. And that's why the Native Americans won.
Well, that's why we all live in the United Apache Kingdom.
Exactly, because guns aren't enough to withstand an overwhelming foe. And so we end up backed into what we'll call the last corner of the colony behind a door where, again, fucking Bill Paxton is like, I'm going to have one more moment of being a dick where I lock out the Canadian guy and his girlfriend before someone hits me in the face with a rifle butt and opens the door for them.
Well, Bill Paxton has his coup, is immediately in charge, tells everybody, no one gets any food, and he just won't help people regardless of that. And he goes into this tiny room. A nice black lady helps the blonde girl and the Canadian lead back into the room.
Yeah. And
as they do, just one cannibal gets in. And he gets stabbed. Bill Paxton gets stabbed in the chest. Bill Paxton has no arc in this movie whatsoever. He is an asshole from the beginning to the end. He has plenty of chances to redeem himself from the moment the cannibals show up, but he does not. He is like, "Oh, you fucking Canadian, I'm gonna kill you." Bah, 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 bah. And they're like, no, we have to get out of here. All the cannibals are coming. So the Canadian lead pulls a vent off and goes, "We're gonna go in here and we're gonna hide." And Bill Paxton pulls a gun on him and tries to shoot him.
No, it wasn't quite that, actually. They pulled off the vent. They're in the middle of their escape. Bill Paxton is clearly just dead set on staying in this room. So the Canadian guy slides him a gun and is like, all right, well, fucking do your shit. Bill Paxton immediately takes the gun, points it at the Canadian guy in one last moment of like, man, am I an asshole or what? Before finally just not shooting him because I guess he went through his entire story arc then.
Well, this is a character who either needs a comeuppance or a redeeming moment. He either needs to die violently because he is such a jerk, or save everyone in a last-ditch effort to redeem his character. He does half of both of those things. He gets shot, he gets stabbed, and is like, oh, well, this is the part where he's going to go, 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 go. And instead he's like, no, I'm going to kill you in cold blood, just murder you. I'm going to just murder the lead of the movie.
For no reason.
And he doesn't for no reason as well. And the cannibal storm in, he's already half dead. He is half killed by being stabbed, threatens the main character with a gun, then sacrifices himself by blowing up a propane tank.
By shooting it.
By shooting it, and ultimately saving nobody.
Well, so he kills a bunch of the cannibals, which plenty of other things they've done do. But of course, the main guy follows the fucking Wolverine policy of explosions can't possibly go down holes. And so he dives into these vents and is the only one of the cannibals who survives.
And the main cannibal jumps in there and fights them in what appears to be the largest air vent in human history, because it's not like they're kneeling down, like they can just straight up stand up.
Yeah, the whole thing is just retarded. And why does there even need to be a main cannibal, considering there is no hierarchy or structure to them at all?
And they have no language or culture or acknowledgement of firearms or technology in any way.
Yes, the very latter perplexes them. And so they just, it's insane how they've survived this long. And I just chalk that up to lazy writing. Just to create this penultimate moment where our protagonist fights him. And surprise, he wins.
So but we can't skip over how he wins. So they fall out of a air vent, and there is a fight between the Canadian lead and the main cannibal. And the main cannibal wins for a little bit because this is how movies work. And then the Canadian lead picks up a crowbar and violently bludgeons this guy to death in the head. He walks away. The guy opens his eyes for one last scare, and the Canadian guy picks up like a hacksaw and
some kind of blade
or something sharp and just cuts this dude's head off from his mouth. He shoves it in his mouth and just saws this dude's face off. And this movie did not earn that kind of gore.
It has not been anywhere close to that kind of violent up until this point.
There is no yes, they're cannibals. They're eating people, they're cutting people up. But in this scene, we watch a man slowly cut the head off another man at the jaw.
Yeah, like all the parts where Lawrence Fishburne is fighting with the ice pick, it's all almost like Power Rangers, where you see him slice into them and the person falls down, but you don't see like throat and viscera explode open or anything like that. Like it really caught me off guard when he just chops this guy's head in half at the mouth.
Well, he chops the guy's head off and he has like a like I am the winner moment, and you're like,
damn
wow.
Right, he's the winner.
Well, he is, but at that point in the movie, you're like, well, where did this come from?
And then he goes crazy and kills all the rest of the survivors.
well, no.
If only.
If only.
But anyway.
And then he becomes the main cannibal.
And they all follow him. And then we learn how they get new people.
That's right.
So, in any case, we see the survivors on the surface kind of wondering about the fate of their Canadian hero. And they greet him as he comes out, and then they kind of their whole plan becomes just make their way to the modified weather controller with their seeds that he thankfully got out, and that's the end of the movie.
I had such a problem. Well, because, like, I thought that the cannibals were going to be, like, mutants.
Yeah.
Because I personally was hoping there were going to be mutants of some kind, or, like, ice monsters.
No, yeah, there's really no... The only thing that's not just normal for now is the weather controlling things and the post-apocalyptic frozen wasteland. Everything else is pretty real world and, in the now, which is...
Okay, well, this is how this movie could have been awesome.
Yeah.
So, it would have been if, while they're walking, they came across the Blood Glacier. And the movie would have been way better. So here's my pitch. The cannibals find the Blood Glacier and eat some of it because they're cannibals and they eat whatever. And then they also eat like a gun. and then they
don't know how to use them.
And then they become right because they're just like they shove anything in their mouth and they become gun people. So now Morpheus and the Canadian lead are running through the snow while the gun people run after them, firing their gun body parts through the snow. And these people who are made of guns are firing their gun parts. The leader of the gun people mutants, and his name will be something like Colt or Remington.
Oh.
He has gun eyes. And he shoots guns out of his eyes. And we'll call it, like, Blood Gunschler, like Glacier. Or, like, Snowshooters. Or, I don't know, 2001 A Space Odyssey. Something.
There you
like,
go. 2012
right.
A Space Odyssey.
2012 A Snow Gun. But
2012 A Snow Gun.
But
All
then
right.
suddenly, Lawrence Fishburne opens his eyes up, and he looks up, and Neo is standing, looking over him, because he was plugged into the Matrix, and it was like a training program, but dun, dun, dun. Then it turns out that Neo has gun eyes, and there's a guitar squeal, and it goes like, wah! And it goes like, we are in the Matrix, or something like that, and the rock song explains how, like, the Matrix, the Colony, Blood Glacier, and 2001 A Space Odyssey were all... And Big Trouble in Little China, too. They're all in the same universe.
Okay, so Scary Movie 7 aside...
I would have loved it.
I know. But, so my overall thoughts of the movie were, I actually kind of enjoyed it. Like, I had to watch the movie twice because the first time I did it, I was doing homework, so I wasn't able to take notes. I fast-forwarded through some chunks because there's obviously a lot of filler. But in the end, like, the action sequences were great to watch. Lawrence Fishburne, I would watch a lot more Lawrence Fishburne with an ice pick killing people. That is a great bit. There's a lot of just lazy writing and inconsistencies in the plot and just the world we live in and that kind of stuff. We pointed out a lot of them, and there's many more to be had. So that's a big negative, is just the lazy writing. The flat characters, partially a symptom of the lazy writing, but definitely worth mentioning in and of itself. Like, you get behind Lawrence Fishburne because he's the kind of person you need in a post-apocalyptic world, and the action's good. But even he doesn't have much of a personality to him, and everybody else is just bad guy or good guy. So it's a very kiddish movie, right up to the point where someone's head gets sawed in half. So I would almost call this like a PG movie until that.
No, you're right. I agree.
And so yeah, that's my overall thoughts. Like, good, but pretty thin, kind of forgettable. So yeah, how do you feel?
It's a weird thing for me because this movie was relatively entertaining. It had some fun parts, but when it was over, I just didn't like it for some reason. Like, I watched it, and then the next morning, I was like, it was just not good. I think the lack of characterization and the extreme opportunity for atmosphere that was just completely avoided left me with like a bland taste in my mouth. And most motives well, not motives. Most movies fall into a category of good, bad, boring, bad, or like dog shit. Like, I feel like that's where most movies fall into, and this movie was far from good, and it wasn't dog shit, but I was hoping it was going to be good, bad, but this movie was in between good, bad, and boring.
Exactly.
And
I don't know. Like I was when I first looked at it, I thought it would be so terrible that like we would have the best time ever watching it, but it was almost just barely good enough to hurt itself.
And like, right. And I was hoping it would be good, bad. It's not. And you and me have a saying where the worst thing a movie can be is boring.
Yeah.
Because a good, bad movie is a movie you want to talk about. And a dog shit movie is a movie that leaves like a stain on your shirt, like you don't forget it. It's always there. But a boring movie is just forgettable, and to me, that's what this was. If you ask me in 2 weeks what I thought about this movie, I'd probably forget that I had even watched it. With that said, I had watched it on a Sunday morning when I had nothing to do. In that instance, yeah, watch it. It's on Netflix right now. If you wake up Sunday morning and you are just dead to the world, watch it. It's serviceable at best. But for every other reason, do not watch this movie. This is a boring-ass movie.
So, overall ratings, I would give this movie 4 low-salt crackers out of 10. It's bland and unoffensive, but it will not leave you satisfied.
I'm going to give it like a marginal good, bad, boring. Like, I'm going to give it between boring and good, bad, because it has enough good, bad in it to be entertaining if you have literally nothing to do. But if you are with friends, it's too boring to watch.
I need a quantified something out of something from you as a rating.
Oh boy, let me look around this room real quick and see what's here. It's 4 pens out of 5 pens. Nope, wait, no.
That is way too generous. Yeah, I was going to say.
No, it's 2 pens.
So we each agree it's about 4 out of 10.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not very good. Well, really quickly for reviews, do you have not reviews, suggestions? Do you have a suggestion?
For a post-apocalyptic movie starring Lawrence Fishburne, I think there's only one recommendation we can really give, The Matrix.
For a post-apocalyptic movie, for me, I'm going to go Road Warrior, because that is a movie where gasoline and food plays in. Also,
and not the flu.
And not the flu, because that really wouldn't matter ultimately. And you know what? Just for the hell of it, Jack Brooks' Monster Hunter.
Not much of a post-apocalypse, but I like your style.
Just way better monsters. If you can find Jack Brooks' Monster Hunter, watch it. Way better movie. Great movie.
That is a bad movie, but it is. There's a lot to talk about.
But in a great way.
But I definitely agree with you. Like, in terms of post-apocalyptic, The Road Warrior probably is a much better film driven by much better things.
Well, because it covers all of its plot holes, and the plot holes that are there, they just don't address. When you're like, well, how do these people get food? In the movie, they just go, well, don't worry about that, because we don't. In this movie, they're like, well, you're like, how do they do gasoline? They're like, well, we just don't, okay? And you're like, yeah, but we need it because that's how electricity works. And they're like, listen, you just need to shut up.
Did you see the cannibals? There's cannibals.
Right, exactly.
So, I feel like there's one thing left to say.
What is that?
Well, we have our plugs, and then we have to end it the way we always end it.
Well, let me do the plugs real quick. If you want to email us for questions, comments, or concerns, or hate mail, we love hate mail, moviehotdog@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter @moviehotdog. Facebook, This Movie Was a Hot Dog. I'm not going to mention the blog. It's staring me in the face, but I'm not going to say it. And other than that, I'm Zach.
And I'm Matt.
And Matt, what do you have to say?
This movie was a hot dog.
Bam, and we're out.